go through, just so I can make sure we're not skipping anything other than planning board stuff. We have first couple are usually just normal business, and then
there's no numbers on these yet, but here reports from town committee is one, which it'll go down lower than that. And then it's pay unpaid bills, budget transfers,
okay, that's all Justin next week.
capital expenditures from borrowing, capital expenditures other than borrowing. Appropriate TNC ride funds, whatever that is, OPED, stabilization fund, CPC, we're having them.
They don't have anything, they told me.
So that article is not even going to be on there. Okay, so that's getting eliminated.
All right.
When it's up to you guys, but we have a new town administrator, so we probably should have a rediscussion about the OPEC stuff, which has always been a bane of my existence, as you know. So maybe with the new town administrator, we will have a different feeling for that. Okay, what else?
The clerical employees contract approval, Lake Street revote acceptance plan, which I hope that we hear from somebody on that, because I want to know why we're doing it.
Does planning board have anything to do with the Lake Street article?
Okay.
Chad, no, okay.
Right.
So
Street acceptance from
hold on a
Fox.
second. Can you reach out to Justin and find out who's presenting or submitting?
Zoning board or select board, okay.
So, well, it's a select board, but they're not the ones who came up with it, so figure out who came up with that and see if they want to come in to discuss it with us.
Street Fox Run Street acceptance, Noon Hill Acres subdivision street acceptance, the zoning bylaw is the second line. Well, they follow this order, and then an update to the wetlands bylaw, which is Conservation Commission. I think we talked about having them in.
And we're having conservation.
They're coming.
Next week is conservation, okay.
Great.
Justin can't come until 7:30 next week, so I figured.
Conservation can go first and then Justin. Okay, so we'll do conservation first next week, and then we'll do the regular capital items and other things that Justin's in charge of. Is that everything?
That's it.
Okay, so that's the full warrant. So it looks like you guys,
Random note below, it's outside the box that they drew, but it says raise for BET agent. I don't know if that's something that we can talk. That would be
star Justin. Yeah, we'll put Justin by that. Okay, so can you, Chad, I will give you the floor if you're ready, and if you can give us an overview of what you expect to see, how many articles, what they are, and I already know you're expecting to vote at the end of the month, but let everybody else know that as well.
Yep. So thank you, Susan. Chad Peck, Chair of the Planning Board. I also have Chris Montfort, who's the Vice Chair. He's on tonight as well. Rich McCarthy couldn't join us. He's got another commitment, so he was unable to join tonight. Thought it best to start with just a real quick overview. We had, as you probably saw, multiple articles which we were trying to condense down in relation to the use table. So that's the allowable use by zoning district, and those are sprinkled out throughout the zoning bylaws. So we decided to pull that back, and we're going to vote at our next meeting to withdraw those from the warrant. We had currently approved to sponsor them, but haven't officially voted to approve them yet, just to sponsor putting them on the warrant. But we decided to be best to back off on that because it's a very complicated issue. We commend, I give huge kudos to Bob Bullock and his team for taking that task on. But we're just not ready yet. It's a very complicated task. We want to make sure we do it right. Plus, there's this whole thing out there with our E-code that we approved to move forward with at the last town meeting hasn't been finalized by the Attorney General. So that just complicates things even more, where we still have the old code that we're making changes to, porting them over to the new code, which we're waiting to get approved on. So again, bottom line is it's a complicated issue. We're trying to streamline it, because when the end result is going to be something that's very easy to use with this giant use table by zoning district. It eliminates a lot of confusion and contradiction, and we want to make sure we get it right. So we're pulling back on all that.
And you're gonna present it in the spring?
So our intent is we're still moving forward internally. Our team, the planning board, we're moving forward we have a meeting, special meeting next week to discuss it even further. But our plan is to put it on the warrant in the spring. And so we anticipate having everything on our end finalized by the end of the year, holding the public hearing in January, getting that, if all goes well at the public hearing in January, then passing it on to you in February. That's our anticipation. So, but I do have 3 articles that are not related to that use table. They are in relation. So we do have Article 1 is in relation to the B1 zoning district, and Articles 2 and 3 are in relation to the C4 zoning district. And before I get into that, also for spring, we anticipate having an article for signage in the downtown, signage throughout the town, backlit signage, which is currently not allowed. So we are currently working on that as well, and we plan to have that ready for spring.
Chad, can I ask a quick question about that?
Absolutely.
Through Susan, that would be a general bylaw as opposed to the one that was on the last, or either last one or the one before.
The last one was
Is there
for,
an exemption from that? Is this an approach to allow for backlit signage throughout the B1 or whatever? Is that what you're planning on?
well, the
Yes.
last one that we voted on was for the town use only. It didn't apply to businesses or anyone else. This one would apply to everyone, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
So we have 2 of our planning board members working with the small businesses in town to get their feedback and input. And they just met, in fact, yesterday with Rich. So we're getting a lot of great feedback from the small businesses in town on what they're looking for and what we feel would be acceptable. So yeah, so I just wanted to put that in there as a placeholder for spring. I don't really have any more details than that right now. We're still working on it.
My recommendation to you guys before you, just so that you're not doing work and then coming to the different boards and then getting feedback and then having to go back and do more work or make changes. I would make sure that when you do it, you're as specific as possible with size, with colors, number of colors, size of the sign, at what hours it can be on, what hours it must be off, what wattage the light bulbs can be. Just if you're not specific, then you don't know what you're going to end up with. And it might get voted down because people will say, oh, well, what if someone does this? And what if someone does that? Whereas if you are very specific and you're, maybe you say, okay, can be no more than 3 colors. It has to be turned off by 10 p.m. and can't come on before, whatever time in the mornings. And, the wattage cannot exceed this wattage, the size, the height.
Yeah, we've also been looking at other towns and their bylaws and how they're treating their signage with respect to that as well. So there's a lot of research going on in how to present it also.
Yeah. I think sometimes when we take a first pass at it, we're always not specific enough.
Oh yeah, we've
so we want to try to
discussed
be as
that.
specific as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've discussed that. And we do want to have those criteria in there that you're talking about.
Are you do you think that you will have the ability or would consider limiting the number of, so let's say there's 5 businesses on a street, can all 5 of them have them, or are we going to limit?
That's the first time I've heard that mentioned. So that's something we'll have to consider as well. Yeah. Yep. So I'd be a little concerned to possibly do, we'll look into that. I'd be a little concerned. You're muted, just so you guys know.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll look into that as well. We want to make sure though it's fair and we're not discriminating against anybody, but yes, we'll take that into consideration. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so for the 3 articles that you are presenting, what let's take the first one, the B1, what does it pertain to?
So the B1 zoning district is to modify the map. Do you have a picture of that?
We have some pictures of it.
Okay, so it is basically to add a 30-foot piece to the west of the fire station property. And that 30 feet is on the church property, and the church is okay with this. We talked, they're fine with it. The reasoning we're doing that is any property abutting to the B1 district that's residential, and the church is residential, you have to have a 30-foot landscape buffer. And so that 30-foot landscape buffer would fall on the fire station property, which then causes a couple issues. One being, if you have that landscape buffer going all the way to the street, it's a sight distance issue when they're pulling out with their trucks. And two is there's a lot of drainage structures, because that parking lot has drainage in it that flows down, and there's a drainage easement there as well. So by expanding the B1 district by 30 feet to the west, this eliminates the fire station from the requirement of having this 30-foot landscape buffer. Now, they are still planning on landscaping all along the backside of the building, all the way up until the front, and even a little bit past the front. But this just makes it simplifies things.
How are they handling the drainage issue?
So there's drainage already in there for the church parking lot. And so there's a drainage easement, and there's already drainage structures there. And if we don't do this, then all those drainage structures are going to have to be modified and adjusted. And then you got landscaping going on top of it. And it turns into a mess by the street. And this way, we don't do anything. The drainage structures that are there, the easements there, just stays as is.
David, did you have something?
I was just going to say there is, because when I was the scoutmaster in town, we used the Federated Church, and we used to have to help them clean it. So yes, there is a drainage structure there.
Okay.
Yep.
What were you going to say, Ron?
Well.
No.
Okay. Well, so this is the kind of thing that a private owner would go in front of the zoning board for, right? Chad? To get either a variance or a special permit or something? Probably a variance.
So the fire station could do, if this doesn't pass, then they would have to go for first. They're already doing a special permit, but this would then be a waiver and a variance on top of all that, which they're trying to avoid.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can I just ask, because this is my first time around on this, so you're basically doing this on behalf of the fire station. And is the B1 what we're taking out of, or is that what the fire station's on?
So so good clarification. So the kind of yellowish, orangish color is residential. The B1 is that reddish color. And then we'd be adding the green, that green kind of rectangle trapezoid there to the red, to the B1.
Okay.
So you're taking 30 feet out of the residential and putting it into the B1 commercial area.
Yes.
Okay.
So can I just follow? I'm sorry, Rob. So like in 1, 2, or 5 years, is it going to look different than it does now, or is that we're doing it so it doesn't have to change?
It will not change at all. That 30-foot piece of land will look exactly the same. The only different, I mean, obviously the whole fire station property will look different, and there will be a landscape buffer along the southern edge and wrapping around the back of the buildings to the west. It just won't have to go all the way to the street.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So, so you're not changing ownership of the land, of course, that stays with the church, right?
Correct.
So the church property now becomes a B1 abutting a residential.
It already is.
No, it's in a residential. It's not in the B1.
But it's still abutting.
It's still abutting.
No, so we're talking about the restriction, right? The restriction is on the property in the B1. They have to do a landscape buffer between them and any residential properties, right?
Correct.
So what you've done is you take the church and you've thrown them into the B1, only 30 feet of them, but they're in the B1 now. Does that create some sort of weird requirement on them to do something different with landscape buffers? Because now they are a B1 property, even though most of their property is in residential, that lot, part of it's in the B1. Does that somehow turn them into a B1 abutting residentials?
it already is.
It,
Yeah, and they would be pre-existing any changes, so they'd be grandfathered in.
right.
Okay.
So it won't impact the church at all, is what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
No, this is to do as little as possible to impact that area. If we don't do this, then we have to do more on the fire station side. And then that means duplicating additional drainage in an area that already has it, adjacent to it at least, and complicating things for the parking. And we've been having issues with getting the proper parking numbers as well. So this kind of helps all of that.
Can I ask, I don't know how relevant this is, but does the fire station have to be in the B1? Could it
You'd have
just
to-
all be turned into residential?
You'd have to rezone the B1 to get the fire station out, because that's the only
That's what
spot.
I'm asking, basically.
Yeah, that's the only spot the fire station can
Oh,
go.
no, but we're essentially doing that for a 30-foot buffer.
Yeah.
Could we do it for
Well, yeah,
the,
exactly.
or is there particular requirements of residential districts that would impact the operation?
Does the fire station show up on a use table in,
Yeah.
it probably doesn't show up in a use table on residential.
Is it on your new use table?
It's on the use table in the B1.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. All right.
So my question is, I generally don't like making like bylaw changes or zoning changes to fit one particular case, right? And that's what this is, as opposed to doing a variance. You're going to permanently change the zoning law or the zone. And it sounds like that's expedient, but like when we start making bylaws and zoning changes for the expediency of a use case that happens in 2022, it's weird. It's just putting exceptions into law. And I'm generally against that. I don't know if there's a better option here. I guess my question, because that's not a question, that's kind of just dumb speaking. The question I have is, why are you doing this to avoid a variance?
So it was, unfortunately, Rich isn't here to speak to that. He would know all the details. He was working with the zoning board on all that. But it was going to be extremely difficult. In fact, I think it was not even, I don't know if we could even get a variance. I think it was just not allowed. And so we are going to be required to have that landscape buffer, that whole 30 feet. I don't know, Chris.
So a variance isn't allowed, but a zoning change would be?
Well,
Zoning change allowed because we would vote on it.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
if I may, as a longtime member of the zoning board who authored many decisions, the zoning, a variance is to be sparingly given and has to meet 4 criteria. I think it's 4 for why you would give it. Now, you could argue that this would meet one of the criteria, which is geological, right? You can't put the landscape buffer on top of your drainage. So that would clearly make you eligible for a variance. But it is kind of, Joe, I mean, weren't you on the zoning board? That one time?
No, that was one book I wasn't on.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, it's uncertainty and it's a pain in the neck.
Mhm.
And we wouldn't do this for a private owner most
I
likely.
think that's probably what Brian, I think that's his point, is we're making an exception for one thing that we would never make for anyone else. Anyone else in this situation, we would tell them, apply for a variance. If you don't get it, go pound sand. I mean,
That being
it sucks
said,
for you.
it's 30 feet for the.
3 feet over stuff that's already overgrown.
Yeah.
The piece that's not been spoken is that this is where the driveway is going to be for the egress of the trucks as they leave. And so if you have that landscape buffer there, it's going to create a line of sight issue for exiting towards the west. And so adding this 30 feet increases the amount of safety on that street as these vehicles leave the driveway into the main street.
Yeah, I don't think Brian's point is that we don't think it needs to be done.
Right.
I think his point is.
I agree. Yeah,
why
I
are we
understand what he's
treating
saying.
them-
Yeah.
Why are we treating them differently and allowing to make a zoning bylaw change when we would never allow this for anyone else? We wouldn't do it for anyone else. I think that's his point.
Right. I'm also interested why we're leaving the zoning down the middle of Main Street as the panhandle sticking out and not making it green all the way through the midline of Main Street.
I have a feeling that that's not drawn, that picture may not be drawn 100% correctly. That yellow is, you can see that yellow encroaches into the, like, yeah, it does encroach in the middle of the street and doesn't stop at the lot line. So I think that's more of a Photoshop issue than anything, and that's misrepresented on here. I see what you're saying now, yeah.
Leave it to Norfolk.
There's a.
If you want, we can have Rich clean that up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because I'm sure we'll have handouts for this.
okay.
At town meeting.
I think that again, not to speak for Brian, not to mansplain you by any means. I think what he's saying is if we're gonna present this at a town meeting, we need to make sure the map is actually correct.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, all right, article, the second and the third that you were discussing applies to the C4.
Yeah, so Article 2 and 3 apply to C4. So Tom DePlacido, the builder of there on Union Street where the bank is, that we all know, we all love that building and the work he did. So he also has the property over there off of, it's in that, I'm drawing a blank.
Isn't this River's Edge?
River's Edge, yes.
Okay.
So he has that property over there at River's Edge that's just been sitting vacant next to the multi-story building where we've got, we got mixed use, some restaurants and whatnot over there. So he's just found that just with the dynamics and the demographics have just kind of changed, where if we can modify this Article 2, we modify these two things, Article 2 and 3, he can move forward with finishing that last piece of property. And again, this is one of those, we talked about the planning board, it's like, well, we're making a change just for one person so he can build a property, build a building, which you're right, it is. But he's also, this is the only C4 district we have in our town. So this doesn't apply to anywhere else. And it's a good opportunity to, by making these changes, to get that property developed, increase our tax revenue, and not have this unfinished parcel out there.
Can I ask a quick question? A couple quick questions. I live right in front of here. Where is the unbuilt lot? Is it, if I'm standing on the road facing the current commercial building, is it to the right of that?
It is to the right of that, yes.
And the current commercial building didn't get built without a lot of arm twisting on the part of the town. 10, 12, whatever years ago it was. I don't understand why
He thinks
we're
it's
doing
for sale.
Yeah.
So this is on, this is like,
It's on no, it's on Rockwood.
it's on Rockwood,
It's
but
right before the.
the
Yeah.
side, the Holbrook side.
Yeah, but after River's Edge before you get to Holbrook, right?
Yes, that's right.
So I'm terrible with people. I'm sorry. I am. Were either of you around when we were either of you on the planning board when we were doing with the B1 committees?
I was on, I don't think Chris was. I was on.
I came in towards the end
tail
of it.
of that.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the biggest things that advisory, as well as a lot of the people on the B1 issues we had, was building height. And you want to make a zoning change to allow larger buildings. And I
No,
understand what you're
no.
saying.
We're not changing the height. All we're changing, so that property is currently zoned for it's age restricted housing units and assisted living, not mixed use. He wants to make it that parcel that's unbuilt, unfinished. He wants it to be a mixed use building. So what's in bold is what's changing.
So he wants to take it from what it says it can only be age restricted housing and for assisted living,
Right.
which is also only 35 feet. And he wants to change it to mixed use so he can be 45 feet.
And I think it's just a little mixed five.
Huh?
Yeah, the 45
exceed
feet
45
exists
feet.
in the actual bylaw now. The issue was he was originally planning I think it was 150 capacity restaurant for that location. But the size, considering the demographics and the changes, as Chad had mentioned, isn't attracting anybody to develop on that property for them. And so he hopes that a smaller footprint might be more interesting. And by adding the mixed use portion, that allows him to put additional apartments or something similar to what we have on the corner where the Norfolk Bank is. And so he's looking to do something like that, where there's, you know, not necessarily retail, but a restaurant on the base, and then additional housing above.
I mean, I have no issue with DePlacido in general. He builds nice stuff. I'm not necessarily worried about him. My only concern would be the same as what Brian was saying, which is you're not giving a variance, you're not giving him a special permit, you're changing the zoning bylaw, which could inevitably affect other things down the road. So we have to make sure that.
But only in the
does-
C4. This
it
is only
doesn't-
related to the C4.
Right.
Correct,
So-
but we have to make sure that even in 20 years from now, I mean, that's kind of the point of it being a zoning bylaw versus a special permit, is that we have to make sure that what we're going to allow for him, if other people were to do that, we would be okay with it, because you can't guarantee that the C4, you might, I know what you're saying there's no other available lot in the C4 that could do this, but that's today. Somebody.
Right,
three
but
people
I mean, in
get
20
together
years
and
from
sell
now, we
their
come back to the
houses and
table and
plow
have a
them
similar
down
conversation.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's the point of making a zoning change, is you have to look at it for today as well as in the future. When you're talking about changing zoning versus giving him a special permit. Can this not be, again, the same question is with the fire station. Can this not be handled with a special permit or a variance?
No, he's not allowed to build that at all. Not by right. There's no way around it. The only way you can do it is by changing this zoning.
So the C4 area allows no mixed use
Correct.
as of today?
What
Correct.
is the current? All right, so that development was presented to the town as a mixed-use development.
Yeah,
Well,
except
'cause it
there's
had-
no,
So the individual buildings aren't mixed use. There's,
correct.
you know,
So is
a
the,
business building on site with
There's
residential.
it's a combo area. It's residential and commercial, but they're not in the same footprint.
That's right.
And you want to change it to where they can be in the same footprint.
Yes.
Okay.
And we feel it makes a lot of sense, and we're comfortable with that change in that district, even long-term. That makes sense.
Go ahead.
It's B1 where Walgreens area is, correct?
Mhm.
So when we were talking about the B1 district, this was my issue, so clearly I remember it. So I'll speak for myself. I had a lot of concern about the mixed-use building proposals because it seemed to be that there was little to no consideration about actually putting in a commercial business on the ground floor. It was all about selling condos and apartments on the top floors. And it appeared to me that the proposal seemed to be a little bit of a Trojan horse of, well, you require mixed use. So don't worry, we'll put some mixed use on the ground floor, but then we're going to go sell all these apartments. And no one really could actually articulate any kind of plan or proposal or anything around what was going to go into the ground floor. Even to the point where it appeared that some of the plans for the buildings weren't even sufficient to house a business. Like there wasn't sufficient water for a restaurant. There wasn't sufficient parking for a business. It seemed completely outrageous that someone would expect there to be a viable business on the ground floor. So my concern with this is if we're getting into the same type of scenario, which is it's mixed use with the promise to the town of bringing more commercial development, but that ground floor may just be a vacant shell, and it's kind of, again, a Trojan horse to get more
Apartments.
ability to sell more.
That's where Article 3 comes in.
Okay. So what's
So
Article 3?
So Article 3 is to insert all that language in bold.
So essentially what they're saying is you got to have the business before you have the residential.
That's not what this says.
because you gotta have.
It's gotta be
the
constructed.
space
Got to
for
be
it.
constructed.
It's gotta be-
Yeah.
Right, so again, what we're talking about, and for those who weren't part of the B1 discussions that we had a couple of years ago. Specifically, there is one building in the B1 area that has always been just an apartments on the
Yep.
top and
You're talking
empty
about
on
the
the
one right
bottom.
up there?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a restaurant.
Zero in- intent to actually use it as commercial space. And I think that is where we are concerned. We were concerned for that in the B1, and we wanted language in there that says, you know, somehow a certain, you can't fulfill the rest of the occupancy until the business is a viable business. You know, you can only be at 75. We don't know exactly how you would word that, but that was our concern. And I think that's what John is saying. It would still be.
And it's a valid concern, and it's a chicken and the egg problem. Unfortunately, you can't put a business in until you have people there, and you can't have people there, you know, until you have something to support them. And, you know, you're going to get the people in, and then you're going to drive the need for something like a restaurant in that location. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're talking about one little lot that has gone unbuilt for a very long time. We're trying to assist the moving forward of this, increasing the tax revenue for the town and kind of closing out that area of what we've been doing. And, you know, hopefully providing a good example for what the rest of the downtown for Norfolk can look like going forward in the future.
One quick response to that about the tax revenue. I mean, I think we've taken a broader perspective about that, and that tax, you know, when we're talking about highly, you know, dense buildings like population density in a small footprint type of thing, the cost to the town in terms of services and schools and all of those good things is going to outweigh the tax revenue to the town. So this is kind of where I say the term Trojan horse is. These proposals were sold to the town of, sure, we're going to have, you know, increase our population density and increase the stress in all of our services. But in return, we're going to offer the town some commercial options, a restaurant, a store, whatever it may be, and then increase the commercial tax base as well. But I think it, I mean, forgive me for saying this way, but it rings a little bit hollow to me, at least, that we're doing this, you know, it doesn't matter whether there's a commercial property there because we're going to increase the tax base with more residencies. I think big picture is it's going to be a net negative for the town from the cost of services to support more dense population there.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a large footprint of the property. I don't know exactly how many units we would be adding to that, but it's not going to add that much of a strain to the town's resources, honestly, not more so than we're already at.
Is this mixed use going to be 55 and older like River's Edge?
That's what I was gonna ask.
I think it would have to be because
It
of
has
the
to be.
C4. Yeah.
So everything in the C4 that's residential has to be 55 and older?
Yes.
So even more reason why it's not going to strain, you know, at least the school systems in that way.
Yep.
And you're getting tax revenues for the school system as a result.
I mean, I don't want you to think that we're just.
No, you're doing your due diligence. You're
suggesting
playing
that. We
devil's
just have to
advocate.
We have to get all of this information. We have to ask all of these questions. We can't, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to look and see where is the slippery slope here. We have to make sure that we're covering all those bases, and we have to find out why you're doing it as a zoning change versus another way, and what the impact's going to be to the town. I mean, we're not saying we don't support it. We're not there yet. We haven't decided, we haven't voted, but I'm just saying that's what, I don't want you to think we're being negative. It's just, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to ask all of these questions and make sure that we can answer anything that comes up at town meeting as well.
Yep.
What's the affordable housing unit requirement for this?
I'm sorry, what was the
I
question?
didn't hear that.
Would be below.
What is, what is affordable housing unit requirement in this area?
It's whatever that new bylaw that got passed for the town, what was that? 18 months ago. I mean, it's,
So it would be one unit because he's not doing it as 40B.
No. would be
Right. It
zero.
would end up being 1 or 2 units
less.
based on the number he's putting in.
yeah, we had, when he proposed it to the planning board, we were thinking it's probably going to be about 2 units. Again, depends on how many units he builds, because we have that new aggressive graduated plan.
Mhm.
Right.
So he's looking to put in roughly 10 to 12, so it would be 1 to 2.
I don't even know if it's that many.
Yeah. We haven't seen, we don't
So,
know yet, but that's roughly,
If he puts
yes.
in 6, it'll be 0.
It'll be 1. It'll be 1.
Yeah, there's no 0 anymore with the new
Yeah.
bylaw. It's 1 minimum.
1
Okay.
minimum, yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
It'll be at least 1, probably 2.
okay.
Right.
So just kind of ask, I imagine you had a similar conversation or conversations at the planning board meetings. People were raising these very similar things but in the end, you're recommending this because in your mind, the pros outweigh the cons. Is that how you would look at it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Do you know, or have you had participation from the residents of River's Edge, or did Placido talk to them about this?
So we have I can't speak for if DePlacido has talked to them, don't know.
Yeah.
We have our public hearing scheduled for October 11th.
Yep.
So I don't know the answer to that.
All right.
So it's gonna be, you're holding your public hearing, when's the warrant getting printed?
Later now.
It goes to print the 27th
I don't remember.
of October.
But it's very end of October.
Okay.
And
So you're holding your public hearing October 11th. If you get the feedback from the residents of River's Edge that they don't want this, will you pull it or are you still gonna proceed?
I mean, you got to remember that the original site plan would have included at least the restaurant portion of this. The only addition would be the mixed use piece, which would include the additional housing. So it's not a huge change, but yes, that's when we would hear the residents.
Right, but
So-
is that what, are you saying you would pull it or you won't pull it
Well,
even if?
I can't, I'd have to know what the comments are from the resident. I mean, if there was if they were strongly adamantly opposed and their arguments warranted not moving forward, then sure, but I don't know what we don't know. So
Is anyone going to do a mailer or some sort of announcement to the residents of River's Edge, like, something like to let them know there's a public hearing about this? Because I mean, I think I'm not just speaking about this type of thing in general, I think, but that's like the thing with the fire station. There's people all in an uproar about the fire station because shockingly, there are people who still don't know the status of the fire station, which I don't know how. But there are people who aren't aware of it. So will you be notifying them because they're abutters that there is going
they
to
would be notified because they're within a certain, because they're abutters within a certain radius, they would get notified that there's public hearing impacting them.
Okay. All right. Is that everything go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So how will this property, so River's Edge is a PMLD, right? Planned multi-lot development, isn't it?
I believe so, yes.
And it's part of the bylaw, you got to be a member of the condo association essentially. So that makes sure that everyone is paying and, the upkeep. And is this building going to be a part of the PMLD? So these tenants will be they'll be involved in the, upkeep of the.
That's a great question. We have not gotten to that. So I will add that to my notes that we need to talk about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Is
I
this,
appreciate you
are
bringing
these
that
the
up.
only 3 things that you're putting on the warrant this for fall?
That's correct.
So all of the other zoning things that Bob was working on, all of the E-code, everything else, all of the little changes and all of the use table changes are all being pulled. Everything else is being pulled.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And these are both these are all 3 2/3 votes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make it clear that as far as I know, I shouldn't speak for anybody else. I don't have a problem with the E-code changes and I don't have a problem with any of the stuff that Bob was originally presenting for the fall. My only issue is, as you know, I emailed Rich last week, is a timeline. We cannot vote on something to be put on, to say that we support it to be voted yes at town meeting. We can't have that printed in the warrant and take that vote until the planning board has voted. So, for example, these things you're voting on at the end of the month, we can't vote on it until you voted on it. Because if you make any minor changes to the wording or pull anything or make any changes, so that was my issue. I just want to make that clear, that was my issue with the 48 articles that were coming before us, was that there just wasn't time to discuss it. You there was never going to be enough time for us to go through all of them, for you to go through all of them, and for us to act on it after you've acted on it. So just make sure that for the spring, it's kind of a weird thing because I'm not sure if you can't vote until you close the warrant with the select board, and maybe that's the issue, but we're just gonna make sure that in the spring, it's gonna be a busy packed warrant anyway with the budget and everything else that's always on the spring warrant. So this is gonna take up a lot of space. So we just wanna make sure that you vote on it in time for it to come to us. And we know that what you're coming to us with, there won't be any further changes to. Because once we take a vote on it, we can't have our support on something that then you or then can go and change. Does that make sense?
That completely makes sense. And we realized that this was, as I mentioned before, this was very complicated because we have these uses sprinkled out through all these different, we have these tables sprinkled out through all the different zoning bylaws, and some of them contradict each other. So we realized that trying to present it, we put it together in a couple different ways, and trying to present it was getting really complicated. We want to make it easy, because if it's hard for us to understand, imagine how hard it is for everybody at town meeting to understand when they, or if they download it or get it printed, when they see it, they're going to be really confused. And we want to make sure that it's simplified as much as possible and put it in a easily presentable package that they can understand. So that's why we decided to pull it back. Plus, to add to that complication was the fact that we originally did it all in our old bylaw, and then we upgraded it to the E-code, but the E-code isn't approved yet. We're waiting on Attorney General. So we don't anticipate any problems there, but we're like, let's just pull this back, take a breath, make sure we get it right, because we want to get it right. And we feel like if it's really confusing for us, it's going to be confusing for everybody else too. So we want to make it easily presentable. And yeah, so that's why we're going to meet again. We're meeting next week. We're going to be working on it. And our goal is to have our portion of it all done by the end of the year, so that we have plenty of time for you, the advisory board and the select board and everybody to review it. So we'll be reaching out to you probably in December, probably after the town meeting in fall, just to give you an overview of where we're at.
Okay. And just also keep in mind that the spring warrant is already with budget discussions and everything else, a really long meeting in and of itself. So you want to make sure that when you're doing it, you're condensing them as best you can.
Yes.
Obviously, I know it can't be one article, but we don't want to go where we have 7 or 8 different articles. We want to try to limit it to 2 to 3, if possible.
That's exactly right. We're going to do it very similar to how
nobody wants to be at a 4-hour town meeting.
No,
so
we're going to do it very similar to how we did the E-code last year or last spring with 3 articles.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's our intent, is to do 2, probably 3 articles. Keep it simple and streamlined.
All right. Does anybody have any further questions with the planning board stuff? Okay.
I just have one.
Okay.
I have the zoning bylaws pulled up, and I can't find those sections. I don't know if that was from the E-code change or whatever, but for context, I want to read what we're changing. And I don't have that.
So
Brian,
those are the E-code numbers.
Okay, so we're making modifications to something that isn't approved by the Attorney General, which is what you've been
Correct.
saying.
It has not been approved by the Attorney General yet. That's why they're
Right.
pulling it.
Well, no, they aren't pulling it. They have it here.
No, the bigger.
No, these are fine.
Right.
These numbers that are in the warrant article refer to the E-code numbering and not existing approved code.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Yep.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Okay, so we will look forward to hearing from you guys and Rich on the 27th, 12th.
The 12th.
All
Yep.
right.
So we'll be
And
back
you
at your
will have
meeting on
voted
the
by then.
12th. Yep.
Okay, and you will have voted by then and will come to us with exactly what you're putting on the warrant.
That's exactly right, just for these three. So when we come to the 12th, it's just these three. We're not going to talk about the use table or the signs because that's for a topic for another day.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have minutes?
You talking
Oh,
about
yes.
the 12th? Okay. Or November,
It's whatever that Wednesday is.
But in October,
Yes, 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 yes.
we haven't gotten that far last week.
If I may, Susan,
Of course.
and I'm sure Joyce will have even worse war stories, but we used to have 3-day meetings.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know. I know. I want to try to, I mean, not that I am completely in control of it by any stretch of the imagination, but I like to, you should see that, and I said to Rich McCarthy, when he told me there was 48, when I found out there was 48 zoning articles, I sent an email to them. And I think it probably impacted a little bit on why they pulled it, a small amount, because I was not having that. Let's just put it that way.
Can't even remember what.
I was not having 48 zoning articles by any stretch of the imagination. And I also was very insistent that they have voted and be prepared before they come back to us, especially if it's 48 zoning changes. So, all right, do we have minutes that we need to approve from last week?
Yep, I took a look, went through them, small minor changes. Otherwise, I recommend approval of the minutes.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay,
No, 'cause we're all here.
Anyone, yeah.
okay, great. All in favor?
Uh,
Aye, and it passed unanimously. I can't keep it straight. I'm sorry. You're new. I apologize, but I cannot. For the life of me, I cannot keep straight which ones have to be roll call votes and which ones don't. And every time I feel like I do one wrong and I get an email from someone that says, you have to revote on that. You didn't take a roll call, or that didn't need to be roll call, or you didn't, you didn't end the meeting with a motion. I'm like, oh my gosh. So minor details like that always mess me up.
So if I may.
yes.
The only thing that I would request, Brian, if you can send that in different format.
Already have sent it as.
Oh, you did. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So. Housekeeping, we have a meeting next week.
Next week will be conservation first, then Justin.
Okay, so 7 to 7:30 will be conservation and 7:30 will be Justin, and he'll go over the capital items and anything on the warrant that was presented by the select board.
Yeah.
Right, Anita? Justin will handle anything presented by the select board?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then the following week,
I just
oh,
want,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I'm gonna be out of town next week, so.
Okay, do you want to participate via Zoom or not at all?
I
And it's
think
okay.
I'll be on a flight, otherwise I would, but.
All right, so if you'll just remind me that next week Mike will be out of town, so I don't sit and make an announcement that we're still waiting for Mike. I do that sometimes. And then the following week is,
We don't have anything currently scheduled for that week. I know zoning planning board had sounded like they might want an additional time to come speak with us. So we offer that as a possibility. Likewise, if Justin can't get through it all on the 28th, that's also open for that. But otherwise, we don't have anything nailed down for that.
so why don't next week, after we're done with whatever we go over on the agenda for next week, which just make sure that the thing online reflects what we're doing. We'll have a discussion, and if we feel like we want to go ahead and get a jump on some of the voting, and we feel comfortable that we're ready to do that, we can go forward with an October 5th meeting. And if we feel like it can wait and it's not a heavy warrant, if we want to do all the voting at once after the planning board comes, then we can just wait and do the voting. What's the week after October 12th?
The
October 19th. We can do it all on the 19th.
We may need write-ups by that time, so
Okay.
I have to find out from the print.
So we may want to keep the October 5th meeting and vote on everything except for the planning board stuff, because we will have been presented by everyone except for planning board at that point.
Yeah.
And then we can vote on planning board the night of and do our write-ups, or the week after. Okay. Does that work for everyone? Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
May I ask a question, a
course.
general procedural question. Is there any way we can get copies of some of the stuff? When we used to have in-person meetings, Erica, we would get the stuff that was going to be.
Yeah,
presented. And
advisory.
I know that it's a different world here.
Well, advisory has a budget for paperwork and for printing, so just contact, I'm assuming Judith or someone in the town clerk's office. And they should be able to print you copies of the warrant for all of us, as well as, especially the night before planning board is coming, the night planning board is coming, we'll need pictures of the use tables and, you know, the B4 and the B1 and all these district maps. It's a little difficult to have everybody trying to pull it up on their computers, so we could have those printed. And then definitely a copy of the warrant whenever Justin's ready to actually put it in, or Judith is ready to put it in warrant in article format. So hopefully we can have that by next week. And so, Mike, you're out next week or you're out October 5th?
Next week.
Next week,
28th.
okay, so we're not voting that night, we're just discussing,
Okay.
most of that is capital items, which are fairly standard. If you'd like, you can email me afterwards and I'll give you an overview, or you can just catch it on YouTube, it'll be on YouTube.
Great.
And then we will vote the next week, so most
On the
likely
5th.
on the 5th. We'll vote on at least on all the non-planning board stuff, because we will not have discussed the planning board stuff yet. Okay, does that work for everybody? All right, I love fall. Meetings are so short. Warrant is tiny. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor to adjourn? Great.